I mean, this event is like a marketer's dream, and so we're really, really excited. You make my job easy. The individuals, the scholars, and the educators that you just saw in this video are all part of CLT's Board of Academic Advisors. And we lean on them heavily when it comes to strategic decisions, especially as it pertains to our beautiful assessments. The board represents leaders from, as you heard, classical, Christian, Catholic, homeschool, as well as college and university. There are teachers, there are counselors, principals, heads of school, association leaders, college professors, curriculum providers, homeschool leaders, university presidents, authors, and more. They're by no means a monolith, though, especially politically speaking, as evidenced by the inclusion of two people that couldn't probably be farther apart on the political spectrum, Cornel West and Robbie George. What they all have in common, though, is their passion for education. It's their passion for children. It's their passion for liberal arts and great books, for education freedom, and of course for CLT. And I have the honor tonight to bring out the closer, to introduce you to one of these esteemed members of our board. Of course, he's so much more than just that. I'm not sure this man needs an introduction, but I was told that at events like this, that's what you do, and so I'll do my very best. Corey DeAngelis is a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children. He's also the executive director at Educational Freedom Institute, an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute, a senior fellow at Reason Foundation, and a board member at Liberty Justice Center. Corey holds a BA and an MA in economics from the University of Texas at San Antonio, where he resides with his lovely fiancée. He received his PhD in education policy from the University of Arkansas. I heard that recently he was named Forbes 30 under 30 for his work on education policy, and that makes me feel pretty darn old. DeAngelis has authored or co-authored over 40 journal articles, book chapters, and reports on education policy, and he's the co-author of one of my personal favorites, School Choice Myths, Setting the Record Straight on Education Freedom. It's a great book, you should get it. And I'm sure, and I sure wish that some of the media pundits would actually read that book before punditing. Corey's research has been published in peer-reviewed academic journals, including Social Science Quarterly, School Effectiveness and School Improvement, Educational Review, and Peabody Journal of Education. He is a regular. I mean, if you turn on the news, chances are you're going to see Corey. And his articles have been published in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the New York Post, National Review, and many more. Like I said, he doesn't really need an introduction, but boy, does he deserve one. And so I found some quotes about Corey that I'm going to read to you. Chris Rufo from the Manhattan Institute and now the New College of Florida said that Corey is leading a universal school choice revolution. A Democratic state representative from Oklahoma called Corey a school voucher king. Take it, take it. The mainstream media has frequently referred to him as the school choice evangelist. Our friend Robert Pondicio at the American Enterprise Institute said, I've said that Corey DeAngelis is the most effective school choice advocate since Milton Friedman. But it's time to revise that statement. He's the most effective ever. And I might add one, Soren Schwab, VP of Partnerships at the Classic Learning Test. Corey is just an all-around great guy, a good man. He's an ally in this movement and a good friend. It's an honor to have him here tonight. Please welcome with me, Dr. Corey DeAngelis.
But no, it has been great to meet you guys and be your friends for a long time now. At first, I was like, well, why are we kind of, how do we relate? How does CLT relate to the school choice movement? It became pretty obvious very quickly. In school choice movement, we're breaking up the government's monopoly on education. CLT is breaking up the College Board's monopoly on testing. So I love being in the same lane as you guys, going in the right direction towards advancing freedom in education. This is my kind of dinner. I don't know about you guys, but we're at the Freedom and Education Dinner, we call this. This is great. What better place to do it than the free state of Florida? Thank you. Thank you, Florida, for leading the school choice revolution before it was cool to do so. For decades, we've had evidence showing school choice competition being a rising tide that lifts all boats. The public schools upped their game in response to competition. We found this for decades in Florida, going from the middle of the pack on NAEP to what? The top of the pack, the top 5, depending on how you look at it, measure the data. Urban Institute's America's Gradebook, finding Florida now at the head of the pack when it comes to the nation's report card. And you can thank school choice for that one and competition. But look, we're in the free state of Florida, the land of educational freedom. It's a great time to be here. Even though they led school choice for a long time, in 2021, Florida had its biggest expansion of school choice in the state's history, even though it was already leading on the issue. Soren, I want to thank you again for the introduction. That was great. School choice evangelist. It has a ring to it, right? DeAngelis, the evangelist. It kind of rhymes. It's so good, I should put it on my Twitter bio. Actually, wait, hold up, too late. I already did it. It's there, school choice evangelist. But look, you also called me doctor right before I came up. I got to clarify that really quickly. I'm not actually a real doctor. I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor. I got the 3-letter thing. I got the PhD in education policy from the University of Arkansas. I can help you with math and stuff, but I can't help you if you're having some issues at the back of the room. So I'm sorry about that. But, I met my fiance who's here at the back of the room as well. So, thank you, Miranda, for being here. She reminded me, I thought it was all cool having a PhD for like a month after I got it, right? Other people have had PhDs in the room, right? You feel really good at the start. But then Miranda reminded me that there's another 3-letter degree that I should probably help her with. She didn't want to get a PhD, but she said, Corey, help me get that MRS degree. Get it, yeah. Wedding's on October 1st in San Antonio, Texas, if anybody wants to come. Jeremy started this off with a toast, so I was like, man, I got to do this too, right? Because there's so much to celebrate tonight in this Freedom and Education dinner. I'm almost getting tired of winning, to be honest. Not yet. Not until we get to every single state with school choice. But you did a toast for the free state of Florida and us being here. But I want to raise everybody's glasses to Randy Weingarten and the Teachers Union for inadvertently doing everything that they could imagined to advance the concept of school choice and homeschooling that anyone could have ever imagined. Thank you, Randy Weingarten. I mean, hey, look, she was at the Supreme Court just the other day. Anybody see her having a total meltdown about student loan forgiveness? She said something at the beginning of the little viral clip that was going around on Twitter, at least. She said, this really pisses me off that they're talking about this at the Supreme Court. Wait until she finds out how much winning we're doing on school choice and freeing families from her depraved clutches once and for all. She's really going to be pissed off then. But look, it seems like the unions can't stop stepping in it over and over and over again. I mean, just a few months ago, I woke up to a tweet that I thought was a headline from a Babylon Bee article, or maybe I thought I was dreaming. It was neither. It was actually real life. It was a Randy Weingarten tweet, and she was in Ukraine, and she said she was going to the front lines to assess the situation. It's like, what is the president of the teachers union from the U.S. doing in Ukraine? By the way, the nation's report card came out finding decades of learning loss right around that time. But I was like, what is she going to do in Ukraine? Make the war go remote like she did with the schools? That might actually help. But no, look, you had the Chicago Teachers Union, for example, striking in 2022. 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years to flatten a generation. They received about $190 billion in so-called COVID relief funding in K-12 education since March of 2020. It's essentially like, at that point in 2022, the hostage takers tried to keep the hostages after accepting the ransom payments. They received in Chicago about $8,000 per student in so-called COVID relief that wasn't even contingent upon reopening the public schools. I mean, there was an amendment introduced in the Senate in Congress, and I think it was Senator Blunt from Missouri introduced a pretty obvious amendment. It should have passed, but it was something along the lines of if you get the COVID relief funding, you actually have to open the schools. It failed on a strictly partisan vote, 50-50. 50-50 is not good enough to pass an amendment in Congress. And so the money wasn't even contingent upon opening the schools. So the fight to keep schools closed was always more about politics and power than safety and the needs of children. But the good news is, although this hurt kids in so many ways, one other story I got to tell you from Chicago is that I'm on Twitter too much. And when I'm looking at my phone and doing stuff, I'm usually on Twitter. My fiance tells me to get off it all the time. I should probably cool down on it. But I looked at a tweet from the Chicago Teachers Union in 2021, and they actually said that the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. They threw every buzzword at the wall to see what would stick so that they didn't have to go back to work. Meanwhile, you had a board member from CTU vacationing in Puerto Rico, obviously in person, while railing against going back to work in person. They ended up deleting that tweet. But look, if it was safe enough to go vacation in person, why wasn't it safe enough to go back to work in person? Well, the answer was obvious. I mean, it's more enjoyable to go to get vacation than it was to go back to work. So you can't really blame them in a way. I don't blame the people in the system. I blame the system itself. One of those sectors, if you look at the private schools, they were open from the get-go. The Catholic schools figured it out. The public school teachers unions were fighting to keep their doors closed as long as possible. They understood that they could hold children's education hostage in perpetuity to secure multiple multi-billion-dollar ransom payments from the taxpayer. And it worked for them. And the problem is one of incentives. One of those sectors received children's education dollars regardless of whether they opened their doors for business. But it was worse than that, because in the public sector, they could say, we're closed because we don't have enough money. Just like they've always said, we're failing when it comes to test scores because we don't have enough money. Underperforming private schools shut down. Underperforming government-run schools get more money. We saw the same thing unfold with COVID. But look, you have Randy Weingarten and the teachers unions have been so drunk on power for so long, it's actually helped us. The push to keep schools closed hurt kids in so many ways. The silver lining was that families got to see what the heck was going on in the classroom. And a lot of parents who thought their kids were in good public schools started to see their schools weren't as good as they thought they were. And it's because parents started to see another dimension of school quality that is arguably more important than most standardized test scores, which is whether the school's curriculum aligns with their values. And Bodie Baucham said it best. We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the good news is parents aren't surprised anymore. They've woken up, they're pushing back at the school board meetings, they're pushing back at the ballot box too, and they're never going back to sleep. The main problem with K-12 education is for far too long, the only special interests represented the adults, the employees in the system. But now, thankfully, the kids have a union of their own, and they're called parents. They're showing up at school board meetings, they're showing up at the ballot box, and while we didn't have a red wave or a blue wave in the midterms in 2022, there was a school choice wave. 76% of the candidates supported by my organization, the American Federation for Children, won their races in 2022, and we didn't just play in the easy ones. We targeted 69 incumbents in state legislatures for opposing parental rights in education, and we took out 40 of them. The message became pretty clear: support parental rights in education or lose your job. And you don't have to take my word for it. You could say, hey, look, of course he's promoting his own organization. Of course he would do that in his own data. But you can just look at the liberal tears in the New Yorker magazine if you don't want to listen to me, where the author lamented in the heading and subheading that education freedom candidates fared depressingly well in the midterms. Well, you know what? They could just go cry harder, because although that's bad news for socialists who want to control other people's kids, that is fantastic news for parents who just want more of a say in their own kids' education. In 2021, we dubbed the year of school choice, because 19 states enacted or expanded programs to fund students as opposed to systems. And Florida had its biggest one-year victory in school choice in Florida history. In 2022, Arizona and Governor Doug Ducey said, you know what, we're going to one up every single one of you guys from 2021, and we're going to go all in on education freedom and allow every single family, regardless of income, regardless of background, regardless of zip code, to be able to take their children's state-funded education dollars to the education provider of their choosing. Arizona is now the gold standard of school choice policy, and they did it with one-seat GOP majorities, I might add. I think Florida is going to follow the lead as well. You know, Ducey last year basically came up to DeSantis and stole the school choice championship belt. I think DeSantis is going to come back and reclaim Florida's school choice crown once and for all. There's been a lot of friendly competition emerging just this year in 2023. I mean, look, we had a lot of competition with 2021 being the best year of school choice ever, and 2022 having the biggest policy victory ever with Arizona going all in. Well, 2023, I was saying it was going to give 2021 a run for its money at the beginning of the year. I think it's already beat 2021 because Iowa, Utah, and just yesterday, Arkansas are 3 more government school monopoly dominoes that have fallen. They went all in, passing universal school choice. Florida has a House bill and a Senate bill as well, pushing for the same policy, allowing all families to have school choice, and they're flying through committees like nothing. I think one of the latest votes was yesterday, like a 12-4 vote or something. It's not even close. So Florida may go all in on education freedom. Nebraska, just yesterday, finally, for the first time in its state's history, through the unicameral legislature, got the 2/3 vote required to end a filibuster. They got 33 votes with 3 Democrats co-sponsoring the bill and voting in favor of the bill as well. So Nebraska may see the first school choice policy in its states. It's one of 2 states that doesn't have any school choice, no charter schools and no private school choice programs in Nebraska. It's kind of hard to get controversial things passed when you need a 2/3 filibuster-proof majority to do so, but they got the votes this year, 33. They have to do it 2 more times. But it's looking like another banner year for school choice. I think it's pretty safe to say that 2023 will be the year for education freedom. And we have no one to thank more than Randy Weingarten and the teachers' unions for overplaying their hand and awakening a sleeping giant. Thank you, guys. Thank you, CLT. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I think I've gotten to the main points that I've wanted to hit. It's just a great time to be a school choice advocate. We've been winning for so long. We haven't been winning in historically. We've been doing incremental reforms, but now we've seen a universal school choice revolution unfolding right before our eyes. And so I think I'll close out before questions with 4 words. And it's kind of the thing I've been doing on the road. If you guys want to do it, I'll do it as well. But it's a selfie video. Even if you went to government schools like me, you'll be able to figure it out. Because it's 4 words. I say fund students. The audience says not systems. And I'm only going to post it if you're loud enough. If you really want to piss Randy Weingarten off, this is the way to do it. And you know, this is a great venue, but I did go on a run earlier, and I wanted to show Miranda, like, hey, let's go check out the venue, right? We were at the Hyatt. We went over to the Breakers. It's the wrong Breakers. It's like, what room are you going to speak in? I'm like, well, let me figure it out. I don't know yet. Sorry, babe, we're not speaking here. I know this is a nice place. The other place is going to be nice, too. At first, I was kind of upset. I was like, Jeremy, why didn't you put me in this hotel room? This is a really nice Why are we staying at the Hyatt when we could be staying at the Breakers? No, thank you so much for having me. But let's finish out with the video. Thank you guys so much for being here. I might do like one of these, because I was going to say, like, it's kind of hard to do a video because I'm going to spin while I'm doing it. I had one drink. I'm not going to, pass out or anything. It is time to fund students, not systems. And we'll do it one more time because now you kind of get what I'm doing. It is time to fund students, not systems. All right, I get choice now. I get one or the other. I really like choice, so I got to take 2 videos. One of those is probably okay, but Again, I want to thank Jeremy and CLT for having me out. Soren for the great introduction. Even though you're 2 feet taller than me, I still love you. I've loved you from day one. Thanks for having me out. Can we do some questions? Is that fine? I think we have some time. Look, it's not 9:15 yet. I'm not going to bore you with 30 minutes of questions, but maybe we can take a couple.
When did you become passionate about school choice and why?
I was born this way. No. Look, I actually started as a researcher at the University of Arkansas, where my first study linked the Milwaukee voucher program, the Milwaukee parental choice program, to crime reduction later on in life. We had individual student level records from the longitudinal evaluation of the program. And this is one of the longest standing programs in the country since 1990. It's been over 3 decades. So we had long-term data. And in Wisconsin, although I'm pretty libertarian in nature, and I don't like what they have going on in Wisconsin, where all you need is first name, last name, and date of birth to look up criminal records for anybody in the state of Wisconsin. So the moral of the story is that if you live in Wisconsin, don't commit any crimes. But as a researcher, I liked that they had that information, and we found huge, statistically significant and substantial reductions in crime by the time the students became 25 to 30 years of age, after matching to similar peers in the public school system, whether they were in a single one-parent household, whether their income levels, their race, and other background characteristics. It wasn't a random assignment study, but it was I'd say the best study that existed on the topic at the time. There's now 6 studies on the topic. Sorry, I've done 2 of them. Each finding, they're all peer-reviewed now, statistically significant positive effects of school choice, whether through charter schools or private school choice programs, on crime reduction. All 6 of them, all significant positive effects on crime reduction. And I think that got me really interested as a researcher, looking at kind of these holistic outcomes of school choice that are super important. And I think getting access to a classical education can help shape outcomes that aren't only captured by standardized test scores. I started to look at things like mental health and political participation as well. But I said I attended government-run schools in Texas. I actually got the chance to go to a magnet school in San Antonio, Texas, still run by the government, but it's a form of school choice in that you're not residentially assigned to it. They have an incentive to compete for their customers or their students, and I felt like that was a night and day difference when it came to the school I was supposed to go to. In middle school, got involved with a lot of people doing drugs, getting in fights. The cool thing was to get rolled into the gang in the bathroom in middle school. High school, my high school that I was supposed to go to was kind of like that too. If you got into fights, you were the cool kid. The school that I ended up attending, though, night and day difference, access to a better education. And I think more families should have access to the school that works best for them. And it shouldn't be limited to schools that are run by the government, though. You should be able to take that funding that's meant for the child to a private school or a charter school or a home-based education option too. After all, education funding is supposed to be meant for educating children, not for propping up and protecting a particular institution, whether it's public or private. The money doesn't belong to the government schools. It belongs to the parents and their kids, or at least they're the intended beneficiaries of that funding, and so they should be able to direct it. And that's how I kind of got into this as a researcher, but also a beneficiary of a form of school choice. Thanks. Abolish the Department of Education. Hey, DeSantis, Hey, DeSantis, I hear some people are murmuring about you running. If you want someone who's easy to manage the Department of Education, you can hire me. I'll be the easiest person to manage. I'll fire myself on the first day. No, but to more directly address your question, most of the school choice victories we're seeing, actually all of them right now, are done at the state level, so federal funding doesn't follow the child. The only federal school choice program that I know of, Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, is the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. It's a federal district. That kind of makes sense. It has to be funded that way. But 92% of education funding for K-12 education, at least, comes from state and local sources. We get the most bang for our buck pushing for reform at the state level. level and you don't have to worry about federal strings. But you might be getting at something else as well, an argument that I've heard, one that I've made myself while I was at the Cato Institute, that with government funding comes government strings. With government shekels comes government shackles. And this is the argument that I've made myself, which is making perfect the enemy of the good. And we should take the incremental victories. We should take the W, or else we're stuck with the L. That Randy Weingarten person I mentioned too many times during this talk has made the same argument, fear-mongering against school choice, saying that, oh, well, in another iteration, I'll find the tweet for you, but is she making this argument because she's some libertarian, anti-government advocate? No. Randy Weingarten, the teachers unions, are making this argument because they know if it gains traction in conservative states, they will be able to block school choice and keep their monopoly gravy train going in blue states and in red states. So that's why she's making this argument. If you're on Randy Weingarten's side and not my side, you're probably on the wrong side. But no, look, there's another doomsday situation that's more likely to happen. And that is, government can already regulate private education and home education today if they wanted to. That's about authoritarians being in office as opposed to school choice programs. I see these as different issues, separate issues. In Oregon, for example, in 1922, the KKK pushed for, and successfully, the government banned private education altogether in 1922. Thankfully, in 1925, the Supreme Court in Pierce versus Society of Sisters famously ruled that the child is not the mere creature of the state and reversed that bigoted law in Oregon. But even today, in New York City, you have people in government coming after the Jewish schools because they're not substantially equivalent to the public schools. New York City doesn't have private school choice programs. This is not a school choice issue. It's about electing people who are going to preserve your liberties as opposed to coming after them. And I will say there are two ways that school choice cuts against the likelihood of this happening. One, if you get more people using private and home education, you get a bigger tent, a bigger coalition to fight against those future calls for regulation when they come. And then two, if people are using private and home education at a larger scale, it'll become more mainstream. This is another silver lining of COVID, is that when people started to exercise homeschooling, or at least schooling at home, or some form of home-based education. I know a lot of people don't want to call this involuntary stuff that was going on during COVID homeschooling, but it was some form of home-based education that parents got a taste of. Every month since April of 2020, EdChoice, another great school choice advocacy organization, polled parents nationwide asking, actually not just parents, but general voters, whether they're more or less favorable towards homeschooling than they were before the pandemic. And every single month since April of 2020, by like a 4-to-1 ratio, the general public was now saying that they were much more likely, about 4 times more likely, to say that they're now more favorable of homeschooling, as opposed to saying they're less favorable of homeschooling relative to pre-pandemic levels. So you get people using private and home education through school choice, bigger tent, defend against calls for regulations, which we should all do when they come. Look, eternal vigilance, or vigilance is the eternal price of liberty. It's something like that, one of those quotes. We must fight together against those calls for regulation in the future, and making the concept more mainstream will help us do that as well. Society will be less likely to call to regulate private and home education if it's not some icky thing that only a few people are doing that they perceive to be an icky thing. And then look, today, we don't live in utopia. 9 out of 10 kids are being educated or indoctrinated in government-run schools where they might turn out to like big government, and they might vote to regulate private and home education in the future. School choice cuts against that as well by allowing more families to escape these schools that are indoctrinating them to like big government, to get to schools that have classical education or some other type of education. I also want to point out, however, not all school choice bills are created equal. We should look at places like Louisiana as a warning sign and say, don't do it that way. They have random-based admissions. You got to take the state test. So let's fight against those type of bills. But let's look at things like Arizona, where you don't have any standardized testing requirements. You can have your admissions processes however you want. And the funding also, there's explicit stipulations in the bill that if you accept the funding, you are not an arm of the government, you're not a state actor. In order to accept the funding, you cannot be required to alter your creed, admissions, or mission, or specialization. That's all in the bill. And so you should be looking at these states pushing school choice policies and lobbying to make sure those things are either in the bill or amended into the bill before final passage. So that's what I would recommend. And the bills that I've seen in Texas, for example, right now, and the one that passed in Arizona, they have anti-regulation language built into them. Don't take my word for it. If it's something going on in your state, you should look and call for those amendments instead of calling and fighting against the bill wholesale. Because again, we should take the incremental victories, take the W, unless we want to get stuck with the L. And before I move on, I have like 6 responses to this question because it does come up quite often from people who I think are my friends. But look, it's things that I've thought about too. It's people coming from the right, like with good intentions. People are coming from it through good intentions. But Thomas Sowell said it best. There are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. And the people fear-mongering about school choice, I was one of them at one point, are looking at one of the potential costs that could be associated with school choice that might happen in the future while missing or ignoring the guaranteed cost of cementing the status quo, the teachers' union monopoly in perpetuity. Let's take the W or else we'll get stuck with the L. I don't know if y'all are telling me to sit down or I'll take it. Thank you, Soren. Yeah, I don't know if you're telling me, hey, look, you need to stop taking questions now. Both, or clapping as well. Well, thank you so much, Soren. Thank you guys for indulging me and asking a few questions. It's great to be in the free state of Florida. My DMs are open, so if you want to talk to me like Jeremy first did, you can reach out to me on Twitter. Happy to answer any questions. God bless you all. Thank you.